I am excited to be here at Legal Week 2019 on the 43rd floor of the Hilton with Nick Bruch.
Brew. It's all right. Everyone says it wrong, so you are not the first person. I'm 36 years old.
Roll again. Okay, just so you know.
Brew and
Hichman, yeah.
Oh, so you guys just came here to fuck with me. Is that the goal? All right, listen, I grew up in Houston, Texas as Zach Abramowitz. And trust me, like, you can't even imagine the way my name was butchered. So, like, I always feel bad when I do it to others. So, Nick Brew and Erin Hichman. Yes. Hichman. Analysts at ALM Media and a new partner of my company, Reply All, and very excited about that. Nick was actually part of the first kickoff conversation back in October about the new competition of the Wall Street firms. The reason I'm really pumped about that partnership, by the way, is ALM has been like a major source of news for me over, I would say, the last year and a half. I've become a daily reader. So it's the first thing I do when your morning starts, which is about 4 o'clock in the afternoon for me. That's when I start my reading. But it's been a very informative to like how I'm looking at the legal industry. I think I sort of started really just with like legal tech startups. It's a very simple focus. And now I've tried to understand how that world is and technology and new and just evolution of legal in general fits into the entire market. And I think that I was initially operating without a better understanding of that, and becoming an ALM reader and reading law.com, whether it's the American Lawyer, Legal Tech News, or Corporate Counsel, is giving you a better sense of the overall business and law, and how a piece about AI might fit in to the entire picture. And having the ability to have y'all go even deeper with deeper insights and analysis and give and take and debating what the sort of implications of the reports that y'all publish are, that is, for me, appointment viewing, because it better informs how I'm seeing legal and able to talk about the legal industry intelligently. So I'm, as a consumer, forget as Zach from Reply All, I'm super excited about this new partnership. But I want to not talk about that. I want to get into the state of the legal industry and y'all's presentation yesterday. We were already up here recording, so I was following a lot of it, on Twitter and following the results. But sounds like legal had a pretty good year and has got projects nicely forward for all of those talking about lawpocalypse and the downfall of legal, and legal ops is going to change and we're still seeing really great growth in the legal industry right now.
Yeah, and I think that is a really interesting point, and that's actually what we started off with, is looking at these competing narratives that are going on. On the one hand, we see law firms did fantastic. They did great. They had their best year since the downturn, essentially, and we expect that they're going to have an even better year when the results come in, which is in a few weeks, I think. So we have that narrative going on. On the other hand, there's the whole law department narrative. They are insourcing more. There is data to back that up. They are. And they are using ASPs. And they're using law firms less. So there's these conflicting messages going on. And it's a little bit confusing, I would say, for the consumer and who's reading the news. Law firms are doing great. In-house teams are not using law firms. So, how do you sort of make sense of that? And I think
how do you make sense of that?
That's how we started off yesterday. And so I think, Nick, you want to jump in?
I would say there's a couple ways you can make sense of it. I mean, I think, first of all, right, the future, right, we talk a lot about the future of the legal market. The future is happening sort of unevenly, right? It's arriving at different times for different companies and different law firms. So that's like a piece of it. But I think also part of it is that the market is sort of separating, and so people tend to sort of look at how the legal market is doing. We tend to look at how AFAs are sort of becoming more common. We look at how law firms are doing, but
even AmLaw 100.
Exactly, and even the AmLaw 10 is a perfect example, right? The AmLaw 10 includes firms like Baker, and Denton's isn't in the AmLaw group anymore, but it would include, and Kirkland, right? And two radically different firms, and those kind of firms are performing very differently, and that's what we see.
Right, and even more different if you compare it to like a Wachtell or a Simpson, and you're talking about the very, very different kind of firms that will have similar revenue numbers are different kind of client and different kind of practice, not necessarily in competition with one another.
That's it. And so what we're arguing is we have to start talking about the legal market in segments. We have to start talking about it in terms of distinct types of firms, distinct types of services. We've got to stop thinking about, oh, the law firm market isn't changing. The law firm business model. There isn't a law firm business model. At the very least, there are two. If not, there are 15 or 20. And that's how we have to start talking about it. And I think once you start talking about the legal market that way, actually all these trends start to fit together in a puzzle that actually starts to work itself out.
So I'm giving the keynote next week at All Law. I'll spoil. I mean, not spoil, because like who's gonna following this be like, we gave away his All Law conference and speech. All right, but my point of comparison is killer whales. I think there's a lot of similarity between law firms and killer whales. First of all, they're the apex predator. They're the incumbents of the ocean, right? But if you look at killer whales, you might just go, oh, they're all the same. They're all black and white. But what you find out when you dig deeper into the world of killer whales, don't ask me why I know so much about killer whales, by the way, is that you have transients, you have migratories, and so essentially you have whales that stick around the same place for their entire lives. They hang out with the mother. Everything is around the mother. And then you have other groups of whales that essentially migrate around the oceans, and their behavior is very different. For instance, the migratory killer whales like to feed on things like great white sharks, on blue whales. If a human was in the water with them, would certainly eat a human.
This sounds, by the way, like Kirkland. So your analogy is working well so far.
But then you have others that are local, that feed on salmon, that are not disruptive, and you can actually see their droned footage of people in New Zealand swimming with killer whales, and you're like, killer! Look at the first name. But what we find out is that everyone, if you call them the ALM Law 100 or law firms, killer whales, they're all black and white, they're all the same. But what you guys were suggesting is that's just not the case, is that there's whole different breeds of these, and when you drill down, you start finding that you can't just talk about the law firm world as, the AM Law 100, different segments. What are some examples, Erin, of firms that you would, like, if you're trying to show a different business model, or the fact that firms don't necessarily do everything the same? What would be like a really great comparison of two different kinds of firms?
I think I'm going to turn this one over to Nick.
So I'll tell you, people always ask me who are my favorite law firms, and I always say the same thing.
The ones that give me good scoops.
Well, there's that piece. But so my two favorite law firms to watch as sort of a market watcher, market analyst, are Kirkland & Ellis and Baker & McKenzie. And the reason is...
We had all the Baker folks up here yesterday.
Oh, well, those are... I'm guessing it's Jay.
We had Jay, Casey, and David Cambry up here yesterday.
Very good group to talk to.
Yeah.
So look at those two firms. And the hiring of Jay is a perfect example of this, right? You have Kirkland on the one hand, who is putting their money where their mouth is. They are making decisions. They're putting money on the table. They are expanding into trying to get high-value clients in PE. They just expanded into Boston, in part in order to get Bain Capital, right?
When Kirkland decides they're going to do something, they do it.
They do it, and unlike many law firms, they put their money in it. They have skin in the game. They say, look, this is where we're going, and you see what they're doing, and everything is about talent, right? That's the business model.
Sure.
The business model is about people. And then look at Baker, right? Where's Baker putting its money on the table? It's putting it in JM's, in Casey Flaherty's. These are people who are experts in process. They are people who know how to tie a business together, know how to tie a global business together. You also look where are they actually putting money in hard infrastructure. Well, the money that went into back office in Belfast, in Manila, in Tampa. These are two radically different business models.
We had Gregory Pullen up here before, and I said to him that when people ask me what the most interesting trend in legal is right now, I say you're going to laugh, but it's law firm back offices.
So I'm 100% with him. There's
no like shirt or hashtag for that one.
No, it sounds incredibly boring, and let's be honest, it probably is. But it is. It's a neat trend. And that trend has just begun. The firms, you look at what they're doing, it's like 80% of it is sort of support functions. It's not a great word to use for it, but it's the one that most people understand. 20% of it is legal. That's going to flip, right? They go for the back office stuff, the support function stuff. They're going to stay for the lawyer stuff, right? They're going to start putting paralegals there. They're going to start putting legal services there. They're going to build a mini Axiom in Belfast. They're going to build a mini Axiom in Tampa, in Manila. Those are going to be ASPs.
Is a law firm going to buy Axiom?
That's funny. That's my theory. My theory is that Axiom is going to be bought either by PwC or by a law firm, and the reason why...
Well, you went specific on PwC.
Yeah. PwC, Deloitte, anyone.
Big Four.
Oh, okay,
Big
fine.
Four. But PwC could be. I mean, they're aggressive.
Sounds like Nick knows something.
No. For the record, I do not.
Turn off the microphone!
So that's my theory. My theory is, and why, right? The biggest problem the Axioms, the Elevates, the United Lexes have is brand and trust. It's not to say their people aren't trustworthy. They are. They're extremely talented people. I used to work for Nancy Jessen. I think she's a fantastic person.
People trust a brand that they know. And
Particularly in legal.
If you don't believe that, notice that Hillary Clinton is considering running again in 2020. And this is not a political conversation. That is a recognized brand, and people trust what they know. I think like that is really key, and I think that's the exact word that I would use is trust.
Exactly.
And by the way, this is the problem I think with a lot of the legal technology startups.
Yes.
Is they've got to spend so much money to build trust. You're not talking about building trust with a sales and marketing team.
Right.
You're talking about building trust with the last line of defense. And I think that's a real challenge, and I think they've found that, the ALSPs have found that. Axiom somehow has backed into what seems like just one of the most incredible brands for a company who didn't spend a ton on marketing traditionally. Like it has to do with, I think, Mark Harris's incredible vision and passion that they've been able to create that brand. And I guess the orange helped, but they've not spent they're not a big spender on marketing, but they have created a brand that people are trusting more. But like you said, like, they don't trust it more than PwC.
Does anyone think
that more than Eisner Amper?
Yeah. Does anyone think that if you took the Axiom brand and changed it to PwC, they wouldn't triple in size in the next 4 years? No, of course, no one thinks that, because it's absurd. It would make them a safe pair of hands. Imagine the psychology of the decision to go with an ASP, to change your law department fundamentally. The GC meets with a ASP. He loves him, right? She loves him. She says, we're going to work with you. We're going to send tons of our spend there. Then she has to go to the board, right? Because this is a big decision, right? She goes to the board and she says, look, all the legal stuff that you guys worry about, I've got a new plan for it. There's this great company. You've never heard of them. They've been around 10 years. The person who runs them is like 47. And the board sort of looks around. Skadden seems to be okay. I think we should go with Skadden, right? That conversation changes completely if it's PwC, and he says, PwC is looking to rehab our law department. The CFO says, they just rehabbed our finance department. Someone else says, they managed our M&A project. Someone says, yeah, fine, get along with it.
It's amazing how legal conference talk doesn't happen in the boardroom. There's a big disconnect. There's a big disconnect with what you'll hear at CLOC, with what you'll hear at the ACC Legal Ops, and this is not to say anything bad about those events. I'm at those events every year, and I have a really great time. If you're listening, folks, do not ban me from your events for saying this. But let's be honest, there's a major disconnect between the, we are moving away from the billable hour AFAs that you'll hear at conference talk, and then in the boardroom it's like, Skadden sounds pretty good. That's there. So we haven't. I don't know when that disconnect is going to melt away, and it may not.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that I follow legal technology a lot, and I had a conversation earlier today that related right to this, that the technology providers are having that exact issue. Who they are connecting with the CIOs, they want them, but then it's getting past that. How do you get your messaging straight to make the case for it? And I think that's where the technology vendors are running into that. I think ASPs, and I don't think that the Big Four have this issue because of their brand, but I think that there is this huge sort of block, and I think that the technology aspect needs to get past the the IT department and move outside of that. And they need to change their messaging. They need to, approach it in different ways. And I think that that's just a huge blockade going on right now is how to sort of infiltrate the law firm. And I think a lot of it has to do with how things have operated over the last however many years.
Right. Well, I think you're also starting to see, and this is very relevant to our sponsors, so I'll give them some credit. Heretik has gone, instead of going for the law firms, they've figured out, wait a second, maybe the better customer to start with is the ASP. Now, the ASP doesn't necessarily have always, with like the Big Four, they have tons of resources.
Right.
ASP might have the resources of a law firm, but they're typically better at evaluating technology. They've been doing this. They've been either using Relativity or one of the major e-discovery providers. They know how to build. If something is missing, they know how to fill in the gap. And Heretik has gone to those customers because they realize that that's probably the appropriate buyer right now for all the reasons that you mentioned.
Yeah.
The question is going to be, at what point does a law firm say, hey, listen, we need to reevaluate our procurement process because now this is critical?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's probably going to happen soon. It's you always think that the law firm the legal industry is 1 year away from changing. Yeah. I do feel like Listen, and I were having this conversation.
This legal week in particular, I'm not sure if it's because I'm more tuned into the industry now than I was, when I started coming to Legal Week a few years ago. It does seem like there was a lot of news this week, and that's even before the New York Times dropped that story on Paul Weiss. We're seeing a lot. So, just to give you right off the bat, Disco raised $83 million to now even top Relativity in amount raised. So that's a significant development. I still think that Disco is not even scratching the anywhere near the kind of revenues that Relativity does, but that's a huge development for a company that I've heard in the investment community, multiple funds that feel like we missed on Disco. We can't believe we missed on them. So that's a huge development. Mm-hmm. All right. Last week, and I have a little bit of bias here, but again, also sponsor of the podcast, Gravity Stack, as reported in the American Lawyer, did the first law firm to law firm, Gravity Stack, wholly owned by Reed Smith, the first law firm to law firm technology deal, where they built a piece of technology in-house and then licensed that technology to McCarthy's in Canada. That is a huge story. We go down. There seems to be the hiring of Jay and Casey was a big one. There's a lot of momentum, and it feels like. And again, if you go back a couple of months, Chapman Cutler selling their deal room technology to Net Documents. Yeah. It's on an earn-out. But it's still a very significant development. When have we seen a law firm sell a piece of technology to a technology provider? So I think we're definitely seeing a lot of movement in this space, and it does feel maybe like this is a year where we're starting to see things turn a little bit.
I personally think the next downturn. I don't think things are going to fundamentally change in the next 6 months or 12 months, but I do think in the next downturn, what we know is going to happen from past downturns is we know that law departments are going to lay off a ton of people. We know law firms probably will too, but I think the law department piece is probably more important because the law departments have grown much bigger. And so they've added a ton of internal headcount. They will shed that headcount. Once they start shedding it, they're going to look for external partners.
Sure.
To deal with the capacity issues that are going to come right away. When they go out and look, it's going to be different than in 2008 when they went out and looked, right? In 2008, there was Axiom. They were big-ish, maybe 100 mil.
Now there's a smorgasbord.
Exactly. And I think...
And there's the access points, meaning we'll go to Legal Week, we'll find them there. We can go to Clock, we can find them there. Meaning, if you're... Or you can see...
and the mentality is different. Yeah. And I do honestly think this coming downturn, which seems probably not that far away, every economist thinks 18 months or so, it's going to be different.
The difference is it's not going to take us by... I think people are gearing up for it. Whereas in 2007, we were like, money! And just, make it rain. And now I think we're everyone... You weren't seeing a ton of articles in the Wall Street Journal a year before the recession that was predicting the recession. Like, it was like Nassim Taleb and some other person that no one was reading, like screaming from the rooftops and no one listening. It was not a situation where we're talking about it now. But like, you're right. Meaning, there's what we have now is like in case of emergency, break glass. We know what to do in the event of a downturn. Here's what you do now.
And even the law firms are thinking differently about the downturn. They're getting ready. They're getting ready to compete with the ASPs. It's all very different than it was in 2008. So part of me thinks that we're at an inflection point, and if that inflection point will likely come in the downturn or somewhere slightly afterwards. That's my theory.
Nick and Erin, thank you so much for coming and hanging out here with me. Rachel, thank you for pouring drinks. And thank you to Gravity Stack and Heretik for sponsoring this podcast and setting this whole thing up. And anyone who's here in the room can see they just did a phenomenal job in making my life easier this week, but also just a lot more fun. Really fun hanging out with you guys.
Thanks, Zach.